People talk about justice, but few ever see it play out right before their eyes. Jane and Janeth had only wanted to fly home, but one woman's prejudice turned a peaceful day into chaos. Still, when their father, the owner of the airline, arrived, the story took a turn no one saw coming. What happened next would leave the entire airport speechless and Miss Riley begging for mercy. Stay until the end because you're going to see how she chose to face it, one they would never ever forget. Jane and Janeth were the kind of twins who finished each other's sentences. They laughed the same, smiled the same, and even rolled their eyes the same way when grown-ups treated them like babies. But today wasn't a normal day. They were flying to New York alone for the first time, and they were both excited and nervous. Their dad, Captain Moses, had waved them off proudly that morning, telling them to behave and to keep their boarding passes safe. Everything was going well until the flight attendant came by. Her name tag read Miss Riley, and she wore the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at the twins sitting quietly in their seats, clutching their backpacks. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "Can I see your tickets again?" Jane blinked. "We already showed them at the gate." "Show them again," Miss Riley snapped. The girls obeyed. Janeth handed hers over first. The attendant held it up like it was something dirty. She muttered. "You're sitting in business class?" "Yes, ma'am," Jane said softly. "Our dad—" "I don't need excuses," Miss Riley cut her off. "You need to tell me who upgraded you, because there's no way you two little girls bought these seats yourselves." Janeth frowned. "Our dad did." "And who is your dad?" "Captain Moses." Miss Riley raised an eyebrow. "Captain," she repeated mockingly, "is that supposed to impress me?" The twins looked at each other confused. They weren't sure what they had done wrong. Other passengers were watching now. A man nearby coughed awkwardly. A woman whispered something behind her magazine. The girls could feel their cheeks burning. Miss Riley crossed her arms. "I'm calling security. You two need to come with me." Jane's voice trembled. "But we didn't do anything." "That's for the officers to decide." Within minutes, 2 policemen boarded the plane, Officer Harold and Officer Rowland, tall, serious-looking men with stern faces. Miss Riley spoke to them in a low voice, gesturing toward the girls. "They're pretending to be passengers in business class. I think they're trying to sneak in." Officer Harold looked down at the twins. "Is that true?" Jane shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Our dad—" "Quiet," Miss Riley barked. Janeth whispered, "Please, we didn't lie." Officer Rowland sighed. "Ma'am, are you sure about this?" Miss Riley nodded confidently. "Positive. I know when someone doesn't belong. They have no proof of purchase." The officers turned to the girls. "Come on, let's step out of the plane for a moment." Jane felt tears sting her eyes. Janeth's hand trembled in hers. Everyone on the plane stared as they walked down the aisle. Someone murmured, "Poor kids." Another whispered, "Must have been troublemakers." In the terminal, the twins sat on a bench, surrounded by the officers. People passed by, staring. Miss Riley stood nearby, arms folded, looking satisfied. Officer Harold spoke first. "Okay, girls, we just need to confirm your story. What's your father's full name?" "Moses Adewale." "And where is he now?" "He's flying another plane. He's a pilot. He's the owner of this airline." "Ha! Owner of the airline. Oh, that's a good one. You two really do have wild imaginations." The girls' eyes widened. "We're telling the truth." But no one seemed to believe them. Miss Riley started talking to the officers again, shaking her head. "You see what I mean? They're lying. It's a shame, really." Officer Rowland looked uncertain. "We can't just assume." Then Jane's phone buzzed. She quickly answered it. "Daddy?" Captain Moses' deep voice came through. "Hey, Princess, are you girls settled in?" Jane swallowed hard. "Daddy, we're not on the plane anymore. They said we were lying." Silence. Then, in a calm but icy voice, Captain Moses asked, "Who said that?" The flight attendant. She called the police. They said we don't belong in business class. Captain Moses's tone changed instantly. Stay where you are. I'm coming. Jane could feel something powerful in his voice. Not anger, something colder. Miss Riley rolled her eyes. You can hang up now, sweetie. Whoever that was, he can't help you. But 10 minutes later, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Firm, steady, commanding. The crowd parted like water. 2 pilots walked in, but everyone's eyes went straight to the tall man in the middle, his uniform crisp, his gold wings shining. Captain Moses. He stopped in front of the officers. I'm Captain Moses Adewale. These are my daughters. Officer Harold's eyebrows shot up. Sir, you're their father? Miss Riley blinked. Wait, you're Captain Moses? Yes, he said quietly, looking her straight in the eye. And I'm also the owner of this airline. The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel. Even the air seemed to freeze. Miss Riley's face drained of color. I didn't know, sir, she stammered. They told you, Captain Moses said firmly. You just didn't listen. Officer Rowland cleared his throat awkwardly. Sir, there must have been a misunderstanding. Oh, there's no misunderstanding, Captain Moses replied. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. My daughters were humiliated, accused, and embarrassed in front of passengers because someone thought they didn't belong. Jane squeezed Janet's hand fast, her heart thumping fast. Miss Riley was trembling now, trying to speak. Sir, please, I was only doing my job. Your job is to serve every passenger with respect, not to decide who looks rich enough to sit in business class. Miss Riley's lips trembled. She tried to explain, but no words came. Captain Moses sighed and looked at Officer Harold. Thank you, officers. I'll handle this from here. Then he turned to his daughters. Come on, girls. Let's go home. But before leaving, he paused. Oh, Miss Riley. She looked up, eyes full of fear. Tomorrow, he said, I'll teach you something I hope you'll never forget. And as he walked away with his daughters, hand in hand, heads high, everyone in the terminal watched in complete silence. The air was thick with tension, confusion, and quiet awe. No one could tell what Captain Moses was planning, but everyone knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over.
The next morning, the sun rose over the airport like nothing had happened. Planes lined up on the runway, luggage carts hummed across the tarmac, and passengers filled the terminal with the usual mix of excitement and hurry. But deep inside the airline's headquarters, something different was brewing. Captain Moses stood in his office, tall, calm, and dressed in his uniform as if carved out of authority itself. His face was unreadable, but the quiet fire in his eyes said enough. Jane and Janet sat on the couch near his desk, still a little shaken from the day before. Daddy, Jane whispered, are you angry? Captain Moses looked at her gently. Not angry, my dear, just disappointed. Janet frowned. At Miss Riley? He shook his head. Not at Miss Riley, at the world that made her believe people like you don't belong where you do. There was a knock on the door. A nervous voice followed. Captain Moses, Miss Riley is here. Send her in. The door opened, and Miss Riley stepped inside. Gone was the confidence from yesterday. Her posture was small now, her face pale, her hands clutching her hat like a lifeline. Sir, she started, I wanted to apologize. Captain Moses raised a hand. You will, but not just to me. She blinked. Sir? He pressed a button on his desk phone. Please bring in the team. Moments later, 5 people entered. 2 managers, a head of security, and 2 flight attendants who had worked on the same flight yesterday. A camera crew from the airline's internal media team followed, quietly setting up. Miss Riley's eyes widened. Wait, what is this? This, Captain Moses said calmly, is training. The twins watched silently as he continued. You see, Miss Riley, my daughters were treated unfairly because you made a judgment before asking a question. Today, you're going to help me teach everyone what that looks like." She swallowed hard. "Sir, please, this is humiliating." "Yesterday was humiliating for two 12-year-old girls who did nothing wrong." The room went quiet. Miss Riley's eyes dropped to the floor. Then Captain Moses turned to the managers. "I want every employee watching this session later. We'll call it the respect lesson." He nodded toward the twins. "Jane, Janeth, would you like to tell everyone what happened?" Jane's voice trembled at first, but she found her courage. "We just showed our tickets like everyone else, but she looked at us like we were lying." Janeth added softly, "We tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. Everyone on the plane stared at us like we were bad." The managers exchanged looks of discomfort. One of them, Mrs. Howard, sighed, "I don't think that's how we train our staff." "No, but it's how some people choose to behave when they forget what humanity means." Miss Riley wiped her eyes. "Sir, I truly didn't mean to—" "Let me ask you something," Captain Moses interrupted. "If they were two little white girls with the same tickets, same clothes, sitting in the same seats, would you have called the police?" Miss Riley froze. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. "That's what I thought," he said quietly. The room was still. Even the camera operator didn't move. Captain Moses turned to the screen behind his desk and pressed a button. A slide appeared, a quote in big white letters on a dark background. "The way you treat those with less power is the real test of your character." He looked at Miss Riley again. "You failed that test yesterday, but I believe people can learn if they're brave enough to face themselves." Miss Riley's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Captain Moses replied. "Just listen." He stepped forward and spoke, not just to her, but to everyone in the room and to the camera. His voice was steady, his tone deep and honest. "When you wear this uniform, you represent something bigger than yourself. Every person who boards one of our planes, no matter their color, accent, or clothes, deserves respect. No child should ever feel small because of someone's prejudice. We fly people across skies, but what's the point if we can't rise above hate on the ground?" The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then, unexpectedly, Captain Moses turned to Miss Riley. "You said you wanted to apologize." She nodded quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then do it to the people you hurt." Miss Riley walked slowly toward the twins. She knelt down, voice shaking. "Jane, Janeth, I am so sorry. I was wrong. I judged you without knowing you. I should have listened." Jane looked at her quietly. "Why didn't you believe us?" Miss Riley's shoulders shook. "Because I thought you couldn't be in those seats. I thought you didn't belong there. But I see now I was the one who didn't belong in that moment." Captain Moses nodded slightly. "That's a start." He motioned for the camera to stop rolling. "Now, Miss Riley," he said softly, "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to make sure this never happens again. So I'm giving you a choice." She looked up, hopeful. "Anything, sir?" "You can resign quietly, or you can stay and spend the next 6 months leading a new training program on equality, respect, and humility for every staff member we have. You'll speak about what happened openly to help others learn." Her mouth fell open. You'd let me stay?" He nodded. "Yes, if you're willing to grow, but you'll have to earn back your wings." Miss Riley took a shaky breath. "I'll do it. I want to do it." Captain Moses extended his hand. She hesitated, then shook it, tears still streaming down her face. Then he turned to his daughters. "You see, girls," he said quietly, "sometimes teaching someone a lesson isn't about shouting or punishing. It's about giving them a chance to change." Jane blinked up at him. "Daddy?" "Yes, Princess."
Do you think she really learned her lesson? He looked out the window at the planes lifting off one by one. I think she will, because she saw herself clearly for the first time. The twins sat quietly beside him, watching the sky. It looked bigger than ever, like a reminder that the world could always change if people had the courage to do better. But just when the day seemed settled, there was a soft knock on the door again. A secretary stepped in. "Captain, there's a reporter outside. They say passengers from yesterday told the news about the incident." Captain Moses' eyes narrowed. "Let them come," he said calmly. "The truth deserves air." And just like that, the story that began with two frightened girls on a plane was about to spread across the nation.
By the next afternoon, the story was everywhere. News stations replayed shaky cell phone clips from passengers on the plane. Jane and Jeanette sitting quietly, the officers escorting them out, Ms. Riley's stern face, and finally the dramatic moment when Captain Moses arrived. "White flight attendant calls police on black twins," one headline read. "Turns out their father owns the airline." It was the kind of story that made people stop scrolling and stare. Inside their home, the twins sat on the couch watching the news. Jane whispered, "They're talking about us on TV." Jeanette nodded slowly. "Do you think Ms. Riley saw it too?" Their dad walked in just then, holding his coffee. "I'm sure she did, but that's not what matters. What matters is what she does next." Later that week, the airline held a live press conference. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded the hall. Captain Moses stood at the podium, the twins beside him, and Ms. Riley off to the side. No uniform, just plain clothes, her face pale but steady. He began. "Yesterday's events showed us how quickly judgment can replace kindness. My daughters experienced something no child should: suspicion instead of safety, humiliation instead of help. But we're not here to attack. We're here to learn." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Captain Moses turned slightly toward Ms. Riley. "She made a mistake, a painful public one, but she chose to face it instead of hiding. That's courage, too." Ms. Riley stepped forward, clutching the microphone with trembling hands. "I was wrong," she said, voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting the plane, but really, I was protecting my own bias. I hurt two innocent girls and made them feel small. I will never do that again." Her voice cracked, and the room went quiet. Then she turned toward Jane and Jeanette. "You two taught me something I'll never forget: that respect doesn't have a color, and kindness doesn't have a seat number." The twins smiled shyly. Jeanette whispered, "We forgive you." Tears filled Ms. Riley's eyes. Captain Moses stepped up again. "From today, every new flight attendant will go through our new training, led by Ms. Riley herself. We call it the lesson, because that's what this is, a lesson about how we see one another." The crowd applauded softly, not out of excitement, but out of respect. As they left the stage, Jane looked up at her dad. "You really did teach her a lesson." He smiled. "No, we did, together." Outside, planes rumbled overhead, crossing the bright sky, white wings gliding through blue. The twins held hands, feeling lighter than they had in days. And somewhere deep inside, even Ms. Riley knew that flight, that mistake, that moment had changed her forever. Because sometimes the strongest lessons don't come from anger. They come from grace. Kindly like, comment on what action you enjoyed most and location, and subscribe. Thank you.